Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining me on this edition of the Localization Fireside Chat. Today is Friday, April 21st, and happy to be joined by my friend and colleague in the industry and respected authority on the conversation when it comes to mergers and acquisition, Michael Klinger. And Michael doesn't need a lot of introduction. Every one of my audience probably know who Michael is, but let's give him the mic a little bit and let Mike introduce himself.
Thanks, Robin. It's always fun to connect. I was just thinking, I was telling my partner I have a funny life. I was trained as a movement therapist back 30 years ago. So that was the world I was in. And then I got married with kids. I thought, Jesus, I went back and got an MBA because I thought, I'm not going to make a living, working with autistic children, helping them move to music. So I got an MBA and I worked I spoke a lot of languages. I'm conversant in 6 languages. So I worked in the international field. Mm-hmm. Started off in a small company doing translation and started doing localization. And then I ended up also doing staffing for the localization field. And fast forward, I worked for a company called Winter Wyman, and it was bought by Comsys, and they wanted to grow our business by buying companies, and that's how the M&A part started. And then I went out on my own about 2006 and did staffing. I started getting requests for people to say, Mike, can you find a business for me? I want to grow in Asia, or I want to grow in Europe. So I didn't even know, what is it? What do you charge? I had no idea. That's how it started. I wasn't really looking to do it. Mm-hmm. At this point, I work with probably over 100 buyers and maybe 15 to 20 sellers, and I've been doing this for 6, 7, 8 years. So I like it. I like helping people.
It's funny you hit a very interesting point. When you are a small to mid-size or mid-size companies in general, larger companies probably have lesser of a problem in it. When you have like a customer, generally it's driven, our services are in our industry is driven by customer demand or market demand. Right. If you have a market demand, let's say in Asia, and you don't have an operation in Asia, in your world, probably somebody would probably think, oh, let me buy something in Asia, and that helps me address the need for my market in that area. Is that really what happens?
Yeah. It's, because there's all these legal components, to starting a business. Suppose you're in Canada and you want to start a business in France, it's much more complicated. But if you buy a company that's already there legally, figure out, you work with the international lawyers to go, okay, it speeds the process up.
Absolutely, it does. Now, tell me a little bit about the Anzo Global, right? That's the name of the company that you guys are operating under right now, right? Anzo Global? Well,
there's 2. Anzo Global does the staffing. Language Transaction does the M&A work. They're 2 separate businesses, kind of sister companies.
Yeah. And they're both owned by you, Michael, or do you have partners? Or
No, they're both owned by me. I'm now a big shot. I should...
Michael, you're always great, man. I love talking to you. It's just, it adds that little smile to the conversation. Always great. So the M&A part, the language transaction, I guess you called it, right? So in your view, I mean, you've been at it for a while. I've known you for many years, and you've been doing this on both sides, the staffing and the language transaction. So that have changed since you've started working in it, And I'm talking about there's multiple facets to change. There's multiple aspects to change in our industry. But what are the major drivers for the transaction to take place if we're talking about somebody selling or somebody buying?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Robert. I think step back and think of the real estate market. And you go, boy, it's a hot market. Well, why? Maybe there's not a lot of houses out there. And people have money, or the interest rates are low. It's kind of a little bit like that here. It's funny now, the banks with the issues with the banks, and now the banks are more careful lending money, and the interest rates are higher. So now it becomes more of a buyer's market because the buyers who have money can, but say 4 or 5 years ago, it was crazy. I mean, I'd have a seller on the market, March 1st, and March 15th, they'd have 4 or 5 offers. So it was, it was a different animal. I think it's moved out of the seller's market, I'd say, to because of more of a buyer's market.
So in your opinion, then, based on what you just told me, I think for what I understand is the financial health of the economy, I guess, interest rate, inflation, etc., are something to watch for in terms of, if you're a buyer or a seller, and how does that impact you? If you're in the buyer mode, you got to take consideration of what's going on around you from an economic perspective, access to finance, etc.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. What I said is true, and it's also not true. In other words, the terms of the banking terms are true. But look, when COVID hit, everyone said, "Oh boy, we're going to be hammered," and a lot of companies grew.
Of course.
Because we're an international market. So, RWS or We Localize, they're not going to stop buying because the terms of the bank, So a lot of it's really going to depend on maybe the mid-size, the $10 million company says, boy, I can't swing the deal this way. The seller's going to take out a seller's note and I'm going to pay out over 5 years instead of 2.
So in your mind, based on what you've seen, where does the split between private equity firms and individual buyers in your world happen? So, is there are most of the transactions are happening because individual buyers or somebody who owns a company wants to grow by buying another company, or more on a PE?
Yeah. I mean, Robin, the industry is funny. Up top, there's the $500 million. You see multilingual computing, the picture of Phil Shaw, $1 billion man. I mean, so there's a handful of those big guys. Then there's, the top 100, they go down to 50 million, 30, 40 million. And then you get all these companies, 15,000 companies that are 2 million, 1 million. PE is not going to touch that. VC is not going to touch that. So those guys are playing in the higher, the higher echelons. And it was always a little shocking to me dealing with PE guys because, you deal with this guy, this veteran who's grew his business and he's now a $50 million company and he's backed by VC. And then you talk to some guy who looks like he hasn't started shaving yet. And he's the money guy behind. So the VC and PE guys, they have no clue about the industry. They're money people. And they're not going to bother with a $2 million company.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it the first time on our channel, the expression.
No, it's shocking. It was shocking, guy. I'm telling you, when I look at these guys, I go, wait, did you graduate college? Oh, yeah, 4 years ago from, Harvard, of course. So it's just the money guys are, a lot of times, those PE guys, they have no knowledge of the industry, but they can tell you about your EBITDA, your adjusted EBITDA, and the trends and all that.
Yeah, it's called they're learning from a book, basically, not from the industry. So, and it's important. I mean, you need that knowledge, but you also need to combine it with the knowledge of the industry, the expertise, what drives this industry. It's a bit of an anomaly in terms of an industry. And back to your question, your comment earlier regarding the top echelon, I guess, as you called them, our industry, and we're not the only one. There are several other industry that fits the same characteristics. You've got the 80-20 rule. I think you and I agree to that. You've got the 80% of the volume of our industry is handled at the top 20 number of companies at the top. And you've got the 20% of the volume is handled by the 80% of the companies at the bottom of the list, I would call it.
Yeah.
So, right. There are other industries like this, like the market research industry comes to mind, which is similar idea. Larger 80-20 split. Again, you've got a lot of that happening. So, in your opinion, Mike, just going back to why would somebody who owns a company would sell generally? In your opinion, what has the main driver or several main drivers that would drive somebody who owns a transition company? I know our industry is not lacking business. Everybody talk about how much business they can't handle. Why would somebody sell?
I'm going to put that back on you, Mr. Ayub. You've been in the industry so long. You know how stressful it is. After 30 years, and you can retire. You grab for that one. No, I mean, there's a lot of, it's a stressful industry, and a lot of the, it's a lifestyle business for a lot of these owners.
Yeah.
And so I'd say the bulk of Kimon Funtakidis said, you don't have a hard job. I said, why? He says, just go to LinkedIn, for CEOs of language companies, and just pick anyone with gray hair. So it's when you're in the industry 30 years and you're ready to retire and you don't have kids going to take over, well, what do you do? I mean, so a lot of people think I'm just going to, just hand it off to, but if, you're smart and you start to plan, so I think the bulk of these guys are doing it.
Retiring, exit.
Yeah, they're not business people, as you and I know. There's not a lot of like sharp business people that come out of Wall Street. The guys who do that, they buy companies. The guys out of Morningside, who I'm not crazy about, they bought the company and then they just turned it around in a few years and they sold it.
Yeah,
there's not a lot of guys like that.
No, and you agree with me probably, like when those transactions happening on the small to mid-size. They're not following the PE cycle, right? So the PE cycle is like a 5-year cycle that everybody knows about. These guys are more long-term. And the other thing I've noticed too, and I've talked to you about it before, is that most of the small to medium-sized companies, they enter into business, and as most businesses will have an exit strategy. What am I going to do with this if it gets to a certain level, or if I can't operate it myself? And generally in other business, you would see like the family stepping in, like, the kids, graduated, they have good education. They want to take mom and dad's jobs, or mom and dad's business. They take it over. That's another one too. Like I'm noticing, like kids the young generation is not interested in this business anymore. I mean, to a large extent, I'm sure there's an exception out there, but what I'm noticing is, based on what I'm hearing, is, these are translators or freelancers. They started a business. They have a small business, like $1 million or $2 million business revenue. And they reach an age where, sorry, I can't work anymore. I mean, everybody's entitled for retirement, and say, okay, well, I accumulated this now. Now, what do I do with it? Nobody wants to take it from my family. So I got to find a way to sell it or do something with it. Yeah,
you nailed it. But you brought something else up, which is interesting, which is really true. And I experienced that. Is suppose you do start it and you get to 2 million, then you get to 4 to 5 million, and then you get to 6 million. You may not be the best person to run it.
Right.
And I did that with my last business. Was with Winter Wyman. We got up to 5 million, and I realized I'm not a tools person. I'm not a process person. I need someone to come in here and say, do this, this, and this when you get to a certain level. So another reason to sell, or at least to find a CEO to step in, is that.
That's right. And if you can't let go as an individual and give that responsibility to somebody else who you can trust, then it becomes a struggle, and then you probably have to sell. So how do, let's say I'm a medium to large size company, and I'm looking for something to buy. How do they identify who to buy? Like, how do they go about identifying the targets that they want to go after?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so mid to large size could cover a lot. Let's just say it's a $10 million company.
Okay.
There's lots of reasons, Robin. For example, if you're an interpreting company and you're mostly on the East Coast, you may look to find something regional. So regional growth. So you might look for the Midwest, a company that's strong in Illinois, or a company that's strong on the West Coast. California always scares people interpreting because of all the W-2, W-9 issues around, 1099 issues around. But let's just say you want to grow in a vertical market. Mm-hmm. You're strong in life science. You want to continue that growth. So you're strong in the legal field, and you want to grow that vertical. So you do that. So there's vertical growth, there's regional growth, and then there's companies that just, they have a tool. I think of some large tool companies that all they need is to take volume, throw it through their system, and they're increasing their margin. So they're looking to grow basically just revenue growth.
I
Just
always, I always had a question mark on that because if you buy a company just to add revenue, why don't you just add salespeople?
yeah, it's funny. So here's another story. When I was,
I know you're on the staffing side. You probably have been asked to hire some people.
well, exactly. No, I was, they bought this company, Compsys bought us, we were PGA, and the guy he was a legend from Texas. He shows up, brings me into a room. He says, I want to make you the biggest language company in the world. But he said, I'm going to buy this. I said, Tom, just give me a budget of 200,000. I'll buy 2 salespeople.
That's right.
It's faster, or organic growth is slower.
Oh, organic growth is slower. You're right. So time to revenue, I guess that's the question there, right?
I mean, yeah, you buy a company, all of a sudden you turbocharge your.
Let's talk a little bit about post. Now that let's say, I'm a company, I found somebody to buy, I bought it. So what is the major challenging issues that you would think about, or you've probably seen already in terms of integrating tools, people?
Yeah. I mean, it's the things you would think about. And this is why it's important to do it beforehand. One of them is culture.
Yeah.
You have a totally different culture. You're a $1 million company. You're bought by a $10 million company. So the cultures are totally different. How do you integrate that? And a lot of smart buyers go, hey, I just came in. I love you guys. I'm going to give you all a 5% raise, and you just continue to do what you do. Then after a year, they come back and say, okay, we don't need this person. That's the sophisticated way of doing it in some ways. But the other problems are, tools integration. You got to make sure that the tools that you use and they use may be different, then you have to transition that over. I see personalities sometimes, a lot of times.
Yeah, you know what? You hit a point. Like, personally, I've been through 2 of them, acquisitions. And what was the most important piece that you already mentioned, Mike, is the cultural fit. It is very important because, our business is not widgets, right? I mean, we do translation for customers. So basically, we're writers on behalf of a customer as an industry. And so if there is not element of trust between the customer and the new organization, then that revenue that you bought, it's going to disappear. So that cultural fit is essential to continue delivering to a customer, in my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you have the cultural fit, you can retain the revenue as especially when you invested, millions of dollars in some cases to buy a company.
Right.
It's in the best interest of the buyer to maintain that, to look to look for a cultural fit, and B is to maintain it.
Yeah.
The slice and dice that everybody is well aware of. There's multiple risks associated with that, unless you just want to buy somebody just to eliminate a competitor, which I have not thought of that, to be honest with you, in our industry. I haven't seen it in our industry, which we're lucky this way. So
yeah. I mean, there's a few people doing that right now, but they go into a state and they have 1 or 2, and then they go get 2 or 3 more because then they corner the market, but not for the most part. Again, this is not a lot of people go in here to save the world. We're not a lot of cutthroat business people. It's my experience.
have you seen in your past experience, based on what you've done so far, have you seen any customer says, I don't like this, I'm leaving?
Customer, you mean after an acquisition?
Yeah, after an acquisition, yeah. It takes place over time, Mike, right? It doesn't happen immediately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in one case, luckily it wasn't me, but I knew the buyer. He bought a company, and the company was, I believe, in Florida, and they had like 70% of their business was from one account. And as you know, there's no contracts. So they bought the company, they spent all this money, and then about 3 or 4 months into the acquisition, after they acquired them, the top account left. Not anything, just because whatever, they got a better deal somewhere else, So the challenges of the service industry is nothing's locked in.
Nothing is locked in, you're right. And that takes me to the next one, because part of the buying a company is how much would you pay for a company, and that the valuation discussion becomes very interesting, especially if you don't have any contracts in place locking anything, because those are the value, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
And customer comes, customer goes, I guess, depends on their needs and does it fit or doesn't. In your opinion, I'm sure you've helped a lot of companies go through the conversation of valuation of their companies. I'm sure, in your opinion, I don't know, but what is your opinion on how that conversation goes sometimes? Because you've got the seller, he's got an opinion about one value, and you've got reality on the other side. So how do you bring them together?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you have to tiptoe a little bit, because I'm worth this, and D, who you're gonna meet in Canada, recently said, someone was in tears about something, because of the valuation. It's like it's very personal, people. But the reality is, it is like the real estate market, and I say to people, it's, look, I get this house means a lot to you. I know you gave birth to 3 kids in here, and your husband died here and whatever, but that doesn't do anything with the market. So the house next to you sold for this amount. This is what you get. So there's multiples that you work with. If you're 2.5 million, it's 3 times your net profit or EBITDA number.
Yeah.
And 6 times. You may want to, but you can't. And if you insist on it, I can't work with you. So I'm not out to screw anybody. I'm just letting them know realistically. Here's what
business runs, though. I mean, you're just stating the fact, really.
Yeah,
some people, if you're a seller and you want X number for your company, that's your prerogative, and that's your decision. You can do whatever you like, and you can ask for as much money as you want. The question is it going to sell? If you are serious about selling, that's another question. And the other one, and I'm sure you've seen it before, where actually, sellers are asking like for multiplication of revenue versus multiplication of EBITDA, for instance. We're not a high-tech company. We're not like, unless there is, I don't know, but
right. No, you're right, Robin. And that's so there's 2 things. There's a service company, but then there's the technology component and AI, look with ChatGPT, all these things going on. I don't know if you remember John Tinsley's company, Ionic Machines, or what?
Yes.
I think he sold, it was like less than $1 million. He sold for 20 million.
Okay, well, he's got a promising technology at the time.
He's got a promising technology. RWS needed it.
Yeah.
Those, I'm working with a company, although they didn't get the multiple I wanted. They do basically immediate translation without a person. So you have someone talking and it records it and then translates it. I mean, it's a technology that's now out there, but it's, so if you have a technology that you can leverage for the client, it's much higher multiple.
Technology valuation is much different than service valuation, right? So
that's right. Exactly.
I mean, isn't RWS still listed on the stock exchange as a tech stock? Technology.
Oh, interesting.
I think they're listed in the technology sector.
Interesting.
I think. I don't know. I mean, I haven't checked it lately, but back in the days before the merger with RWS, they were listed in the technology stock. So and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you can get more money for what you've worked hard for, or what you've developed, and if you've got like some essential technology that you can get more valuation for, fine. But in the case where you only have services, you have services, and you're trying to sell it based on multiplication of revenue because I've got a good customer, and this is another one extreme scenario where you've got a good customer, but you don't have a contract to lock them in, that customer could walk away. There's a lot of volatility, you know what I'm saying?
That's right. So, yeah. So, a smart buyer, people say, well, I don't think they're worth this. I'd say they've had this customer for 15 years, and they've only done, 20% of their budget. So as a buyer, you want to really invest in who are their accounts and can you grow them? And that's where the buyer goes, yeah, I'll pay 4 or 5 times multiple EBITDA multiple because I can see we're going to grow these solid accounts because they've undersold them.
That's right. So do you still see like a lot of in your world? I mean, I'm sure they're involved everywhere, but do you still see do you deal with PE firms yourself, your company?
Yeah, yeah, I do, because if I look at now the buyers, I work with a lot of the larger buyers, the big boys, and they have what's fun. It's a little bit like the ventriloquist and the dummy, because the dummy is the CEO that's been in this industry. And they'll say one thing, and then they go to the VC and say, what do you think, we want to buy this company? And the VC says no. So they come back and say, no, we can't buy this company. It's like, well, you just said you wanted to buy them.
Yeah.
The VC guys run the show. And there are a lot of these bigger companies are VC funded. They're VC backed or private equity. And you still have someone who's knowledgeable in the driver's seat, but they're no longer calling the shots. It's kind of it's the guy who doesn't shave yet.
The hardware guy. Just graduated. Just graduated. So, I mean, I don't know, but for me, I feel after I read the news every day, I feel like there's money coming to the industry from a variety of places. I always hear companies investing from outside the industry, investing, in some cases, multi-million dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in certain initiatives or certain companies, et cetera. Meanwhile, I take a look at what's going on in our technology, and we were having a discussion on the podcast last week about ChatGPT with Diego from Italy.
This area, yeah.
Area. So I would, I'm surprised that, there's a lot of financial interest. I get it. Investors wants to park their money and they would like to see which industry gives them return on investment. That's fine. But also being from inside the industry, I'm always puzzled by that. I don't know. What do you think?
It's funny. You're like the Red Sox. They never believed they could win the pennant. How could you invest in the language industry? But you're right. And industry, they're pouring money into this industry. I think there is a distinction. They're pouring into these technology companies, these AI. There's all these companies that do dubbing. There's synthetic voice going in. I mean, there's so many AI components so they're pouring money into these companies. They're getting money, but the mom and pop shops, they're still just mom and pop shops, and that's not being touched for them. But I think there's a lot of money going into these creative technology plays. That it's the biggest thing I think. Technology changes since the internet came.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been talking on the podcast here for several companies that have great ideas that they're bringing in. We talked about synthetic voice dubbing. We talked to a company in Vienna, VoxCube. I'm not sure if you know them. They have the CEO is Valentin Grishenko, and he's got a nice technology that enables, you can take audio and you can put it in any language you want, basically, a video, whatever. So it's pretty cool, like the innovation that's going on. And I know you probably heard the statement that says the need is the mother of all inventions. So, you've got this, you've seen it on Slater, Mr. Beast from YouTube decided to create his own company, and that brings us to another conversation altogether. As an industry, we either play the protection of revenue or we get creative. If we don't get creative, somebody will get creative. And most likely it's going to be from outside the industry. Yeah, it's fascinating to see. I think it's this generation, they grew up with internet. I mean, I had to write an article for Multilingual. I co-wrote it about AI and globalization. And it's so funny because ever since we went from manual to electric typewriter, I backed out of the technology space completely. So you still have a typewriter, Mike?
That's right. I do somewhere. So I'm not, but kids who grew up, with phones, and this is second nature to them. So there's a lot of young folks in this industry now. There's who see it differently than we do. And the idea that the world is smaller is true. I mean,
but you're right. I mean, you bring up a very philosophical discussion about our industry. You've got two poles here. You've got one, the traditionalists, I guess, in our industry, where you have people have been doing this for many years. They've learned it in a certain way. And let's face it, those individuals are very resistant to change. So you throw new technology, you throw new methods at them, not really. And you've got the new generation, which is part of the evolution process, in my opinion. You got a new generation coming in saying, hey, there's a better way of doing this. And have you considered this? And it's really taken off. Like we had a conversation last week and we're asking the question, do you think, the new technologies that are coming out, and every day there's a new technology coming out in our industry now. Do you think will be the end of our industry? And the answer, everybody seems to be telling me no, because there's a lot more to do with those technology, to harness the power of technology. To create services around those technologies that's kind of enabled this industry to continue on for many years. I mean, since the Babylon day, right, 10,000 years ago, we're still going, and this will continue going. Now, the good news about our industry is that with the advancement of communication, internet, etc., people are talking more, creating more content, exchanging ideas more. Before all this, not too long ago. I'm gonna date myself here, but everybody knows how old I am. It's not a secret. In the early 2000s, that's not far ago. In the early 2000s, there's like less communication that we have here by leaps and bounds. Now with and what we've noticed, and the industry can attest to that, is we used to have like large documents to translate, large projects to translate. You get like those mega projects where you can design solutions around, you can put them together in a more thoughtful way. Now you got is 45, 50 words here, 100 words there, and you got to do them quickly. So the needs has changed, evolved based on the communication that we're using.
Exactly, Robin. Back in the day, I remember when Microsoft came out with, talk about dating myself, 3.1J. It was Microsoft, a Japanese translation, and they did it every 6 months. It's a big localization effort, and Microsoft was the most sophisticated. And that, in the 1998. Then with Google, you get, every week there's an update. Everything, you have to localize. But now it's instantaneous. So what the needs are is that you can talk now, and this can be recorded and press a button, and it will be spoken in 100 different languages.
Correct.
We have now. Or you get a message, it's a song you hear on YouTube, you can download it and then have it translated immediately. So it's instantaneous. So it's a different localization process altogether and different needs.
That's right. Absolutely. And beside the fact that content is growing on a yearly basis, right? So, and everywhere we go, every webinar we attend, every conference we go to, people saying that content is growing. Not, the number of words that we're generating as a humanity, as a people, is growing, depends on the year, but during COVID, I've seen numbers like puts it in the 40% growth. Wow. And so when you have so much content to grow, on a steady average is about 20% per year. So, but if you are growing on a 20% per year, well, if technology is not helping us to do a better job in communicating in multilingual environment, so what's the alternative, right? And we don't have enough people that speaks multiple languages or graduated from university from a linguistic degree to do this. You got to fill the gap with some sort of a technology solution to allow that to happen.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. I gotta say, there's a shortage of interpreters. There's a shortage of translators. So I'm going to go.
Of course, even if you need to translate all the content that we created using the traditional methods, you probably need the population of the globe to do it. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, and that's where NMT is stepping it up. And I saw a quote from Kurt Divashi. I questioned it. He said 99% of translation is there's a machine translation component. That's quite a number.
So there's some truth to that, but I don't know about the 99%. But there is some truth to that. And here's what I think. I think MT is a component in the process.
Right, for sure.
It is not the entire process. Right. And for that matter, yes, I would have to agree that most companies or most individuals in some cases, they are using parts of MT to get going basically, or do the first draft, if you will, if you were in the writing environment.
Yeah.
you probably do it a little bit better by using editing on top of that. So,
right.
So because you have a dual role and you have dual companies, one that does staffing and one that does acquisition and mergers and acquisition, can we talk a little bit about how the job market impacted with all this mergers and acquisition? What have you seen in the localization world resulted from M&As, job growth, job reduction, creating new jobs?
Yeah. Interesting question. I don't know what I'm seeing more in the immediate is the more need for financial guys, more need for these guys outside of the industry to go, okay, here's what the numbers are, here's how this work. Yeah. The other big piece that people talk about now, just to go back to what we we're just saying, is you acquire also to get resources, because resources are finite. So if you're an interpreting company, I know ASL business, I do a lot of work with sign language companies, and there's a shortage ever since COVID. There's a shortage of ASL folks worldwide. So you're an ASL owner and you have more work than you can handle, but you don't have the resources. So one thing companies are doing is buying a company to get the resources. So that's one thing, but there's also there's more need for people outside the industry. Like I said, the guys who don't shave and come from Harvard, but also guys with financial degrees that have they've done M&A, for example, and they go, oh, you can't, this is the cost of this acquisition. Don't do it that way. Mm-hmm. There's more financial folks involved here than used to be because.
Yeah, because you need all these experts now because with money comes the strings, I guess, right? So when you've got money flowing into the industry, somebody needs to keep an eye on that investment. Obviously, those experts from outside the industry will come to play a role in it.
Yeah.
If you were to give an advice, let's say for somebody who is trying to sell their companies, what are some of the legal consideration they should do, or any prep work that should probably consider before they walk into that journey of selling their organization or their company? What are some of the things they should prepare for?
Yeah. And again, I don't know why I like analogies in the house. Someone says, well, what should I do with my business? I say, well, if you're going to sell your house and you have a hole in the attic, fix that. No one else knows it, but you do. So you have a translation business and you have either, you have huge debt, or you have, salespeople, and, you want to fix whatever your company is, because a company wants to buy you on one level because you're running well. There's other companies that'll buy you because you are a fixer-upper. You have been in the business 20 years, but you have 100 accounts that you haven't followed up with.
Yeah, that's right.
But a fixer-upper is going to be less. You're going to make less money. So, but if I advise a seller is get your financials in order.
Yeah.
Down your debt. Get better margins, because your sales price
is going to be based
on your profit.
Yeah.
You need to clean that up a little bit.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is you got to define what you're selling. It has to be a clean transaction. So in some cases, you have, let's say, companies who's got like shareholders here and there. You've got on the legal side, incorporated in 2-3 different countries.
That's right.
You gotta figure out, what are you selling, and as a business owner, try to wrap your head first around what are you selling and how much, from a quantity perspective, from a legal entity perspective. And you're right. I mean, and this process should start like not just 6 months before you start selling it. This process should start like 3 years before, or 4 years. Right. Because those financial statements will eventually find you.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's right. I remember one of my early times selling, the guy, it wasn't just him. He had like 15 different people owning parts of the business. I said, you got to get agreement on 15 people selling your business at the price. No, I run this. It's my decision. Well, he didn't. When they came up with the buyer, he gave me a price, and 2 guys who own like 3 or 4% of the business said, I don't want to do it. So you get that kind of deal. But the other point you bring up, Robin, is if you're in the U.S. and you want to buy a company, in Mexico, or you want to buy a company in Japan, there's legal stuff you have to understand, and it's out of my purview. That's you want to have legal people in those countries, lawyers who do international law, because the purchasing is a lot more complexity to it.
Correct. We're both of us are in North America. We're used to the legal system here, or the commerce system here in Canada and the US. But when you step outside of that, some of them are the same. Some of them are a bit more complex, and some of them are really complex to get things done.
Yeah.
And some of them are very bureaucratic systems too. So you gotta, some of them are non-traditional. Like I said, sometimes you have to,
right.
Do something outside of the ordinary to get things done sometimes. So
yeah. And then the legal laws of fire. You buy a company in France, you're stuck with those people for a while, and if you know anything about
it becomes an issue.
It's a challenge, right? Yeah.
Right. So tell me, looking ahead, what do you expect in terms of the M&A activity in our industry, and what the trends? What do you think would be the drivers? Yeah,
I mean, everyone's talking about the ChatGPT that you had last week.
Buzzword now. I mean, this thing is just everybody talking about is like, oh my God, it's the first time we hear something about technology.
I read a good cartoon this morning in Zitz. The guy, the father, who's like this dentist, and the kid is this hip kid, and the father says, "Hey, I just used ChatGPT to send this thank you letter to my constituents." And the next picture is the son going to his friend. He goes, "AI is dead." He goes, "What? No." He says, "Yeah, my parents are using it." So if you get to the level where everyone is using, AI, then it becomes ubiquitous, and we're not there yet. So the drivers right now are these, hot companies that are doing AI and have some kind of interface, whether we talked about dubbing or, marketing and that's hot, and that's where investment's going to go. A lot of these mom and pop shops are still going to stay mom and pop shops, and they're not going to take over. Lionbridge, Accolade, RWS, they're going to use Lionbridge. They'll use the technology because they have to, but the small guys aren't going to, and they'll still get bought up. So I think the money, the VC money or the PE, it's going to be invested in the kind of the technology, this sexy technology.
Mm-hmm. But, and people, I mean, you brought up a very good point earlier. I think people is going to be key here because the lack of resources is seen everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. So keep doing what you're doing as a seller, and treat your people well, because they're the value of your business.
Correct. Now, for our audience, and what would you, if somebody's listening to this and they want to move to the next level, I guess reach out to you? Is that?
That's a nice plug, Rami. Yeah. Yeah. I sold my apartment once without a real estate broker, but I had to have a lawyer and accountant. You want to make sure you have a legal and financial. But yeah, I mean, the advantage of working with someone like me is that we've done this many times, so we can take the sting out of it.
Yeah.
I talk about, you ever ride the New York subways, you get lost in a second. But if you live there, you just say, hey, get off the A and take the double D, whatever. It's not a big deal. So I do that for a living. So yeah, if you're at that level and you say, boy, I'd like some help here, I'd be glad to.
Yeah, absolutely. And Enzo Global is very easy found. You can just Google Enzo Global, and Michael will be happy to assist anybody who's got interest in having a discussion on mergers and acquisition, or just to have a breeze chat with Michael. Is very approachable guy. I've known him for many years. Don't be shy. Reach out to Michael, and we all in the industry try to support one another. If we can solve the problem, if this podcast can solve the problem by introducing a good discussion around, buying a business or selling a business, that's the objective for all of us in this case. And any last statement from your side, Mike?
No, enjoy the spring. It's beautiful out there. Thank you. Thanks, Robin. I appreciate it.
I want to thank you, Michael, for coming on online with me this morning. And I always enjoy our conversation. I hope our audience finds it interesting, and I'm sure they will. Very interesting to have a business conversation. Normally we talk about the nuts and bolts of the industry, but those business conversations are also interesting as well, because, we're in it to provide a service, but we're a business at the end of the day. So thanks again for coming online with me. I really appreciate your time this morning.
Sure.